I didn't get one. Usually have it. All right, good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's, 7:04? And we'll take attendance. Pete, are you here? I can hear you talking. I'm going backwards. Julie? Michael? Here. Lisa? Not here. Jen? Hi, Jen. Stephanie? No. Jim? No. Michelle? Hi. Greg? John? Alan is here. And I'm here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have a quorum. Great. Okay. Next meeting on the agenda is public comment. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments on the items on the consent agenda? Hearing none, those items are approved. The chair's report is next. Obviously, we had a very hot start to the school year, which I'll let Megan elaborate on if she wants to. But I think I could say that we all appreciate the hands-on effort that you made this week of actually sitting in the classroom and getting a sense for just how hot some of the classes were, and or I was going to say or weren't, but I'm not sure that even qualifies the week we had. But it's nice that you made it personal like that and got out there. Thought that was good. And then of course a few other things that happened along the way that you'll get into. But the school year is officially kicked off, and away we go. So with that, there's only one other thing we'll talk about the board schedule a little later on in the agenda. But we had a retreat scheduled for next week, which is canceled. In lieu of that, since it was on the calendar, we're going to use that time to have a committee meeting for a committee that I sent a note out to everybody, if you've seen it or not. Something I mentioned during the convocation is creating a digital committee, which is aimed really at focusing on the learning, the digital learning experience, and I'll say the digital experience of being part of the Chapag environment. So that means if you're a parent, that means if you're a student, staff, any level of staff in the administration, et cetera, how we interact with each other digitally. There's a lot to unpack there. There's been requests over time to communicate more through social media. So those are the things that when Megan and I talked about the committee, those are the things that we were thinking about. We talk about Z-Space and that's virtual learning, and that's part of a larger agenda. What else is out there, as opposed to something that sort of just falls out and doesn't, feel like, where does it fit in? How does it fit in? Is it part of a larger agenda? And it should be. So that's what the idea behind the committee, as well as looking for efficiencies in how we operate. Michelle brought up something earlier, I think the first board meeting, about your binder and a stack of papers, and maybe we all get the packs in the beginning of the year, and the paper looks very familiar, and if we haven't moved, there's probably a lot of information in there that's still relevant. And my sense is there's got to be a better way to eliminate a lot of that paperwork, make it easier on parents to, for example, just confirm that all this data hasn't changed over the years, and click that versus filling out all this paper, because that paper has to be handled first, to be created as packages, to be sent out, cost us money to do the mailing. Somebody has to handle it again, it has to be returned back, then it has to be manually rekeyed into a database, which invites keying errors, invites paperwork getting lost, etc. Now there may be some things along that vein where you get into regulatory issues which require the paperwork, unfortunately. But that still doesn't mean that information couldn't be keyed in by the originator and then printed and signed. You know, so even then we could just make things a little bit easier, because if they do that, then all the information is in a database. It might not be the official record that's used for state and auditing purposes, but it's still a record used for administrative purposes. You know, so again, I think there's opportunity there, and Megan's brought out a few other things about are we leveraging some of the tools that we already have in place, like Schoology and PowerSchool. Naviance is probably more of a mature platform, but we own these platforms. What else can they do for us? How do other districts use these platforms, et cetera? So I think there's going to be more to deal with there than we have the time to put in. But that's part of what the committee will help the administration do is figure out, well, what are those priorities given a limited amount of budget, a limited amount of time. So that's what the committee is about. Alan has agreed to join me on the committee. I'm still looking, because 2 is not a quorum, so I'm still looking for anybody else who wants to participate. We're going to go forward anyway and just keep this going, and maybe we don't vote on anything, so I don't think a quorum's necessary, but we could start organizing our thinking and getting some thoughts. Of course, Megan will be a non-voting member of the committee, and anybody else on her staff that she thinks would be appropriate given the conversation, which may change from week to week or agenda item to agenda item. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Megan, unless somebody has a question.
I was just going to say I'm happy to volunteer as long as it's not scheduled on other committee. I don't know when you're planning on meeting.
Well, I got Monday, that's it.
Okay, the first
that's as
one.
far as I'm
All
going.
right, well, and I already
Monday.
booked that in the calendar.
Well, that's why I grabbed
so.
it, because it was on my calendar already, and I figured a few others, but rather than release the date. So but that's as far as I got, Michelle.
Cool. All right.
Okay. Thank you. All right. The floor is yours.
Good evening. We'll start off with our personnel announcements, because I know that the announcement of our school resource officer has been one that we're holding off on, trying to get all of the towns organized and making certain he was sworn in. And so that is going to be forthcoming, all the towns coming together, and we'll do a little ceremony. But without further ado, Rich Iniamo is going to be working with our students. He's already made himself part of this school community. You'll find him often in the mall talking to the students. He's already gone to the elementary schools. Found him at a couple ice cream socials. So to say that he has absolutely submerging himself says, I think this was the right fit. Additionally, that we had a hire of Amanda Phoenix. She will be an English teacher here at Chippewa for a 1-year position. So she is coming to us right out of college, but I can tell you her energy as well as her understanding of how to work with our middle school students set her apart. So we're happy to have them on board. So the first day, I'm going to really talk about the first week of school very quickly. It was hot, so we were able to power through. We really, I have to commend Don O'Leary and all of the custodians, as well as administrators and our teachers, for trying to cycle our kids through to make certain that they were able to be in cool down areas. Recess was really in a dark room with a movie and making certain we were monitoring for temperatures and health. But I had a lot of students who still came back and were so excited and no complaints, so a testament to our children. But Burnham decided to, even one-up it a little, so we had an issue where water was down, and so they got a field trip to the fire station, and so it was a special thank you to the Bridgewater Town Hall who coordinated all of those things to make certain our students were still taken care of. Additionally, then, we had some issues with some internet fun, and again, I always say it's not what you do when everything goes right, it's what you do when things go wrong, and really the staffs came together and just made it all happen. Even Debbie sitting there handing me her cell phone, trying to figure out how we can make the phone calls out to parents. It was really a team effort, and a thank you to the Gun Library who let us hop on their internet so we could get the message out to our families. I also want to thank, there's a number of people who are stepping up in wonderful ways, but if you have not already gone on our new website or our social media platform, that is Colin Sullivan, who you don't often see in front of the cameras. He's always doing the behind the camera work for us. But if you go onto these platforms, what you're going to see is he has really taken the information and made it digestible for anybody who comes to visit our sites. And I think he has absolutely elevated what we're doing, the way information is presented. So thank you, Colin. I also want to congratulate Matt Paracci for his appointment to the Connecticut Association of Athletic Directors. He will be the president this year. Kudos to him. And additionally, he did give me the update that the field hockey was at Lewis Mills High School, and cross-country teams went to the Washingtonville Invitational. Our field hockey teams traveled to Burlington on Friday for the season opener and beat Lewis Mills 1-0. And a shout out to our goalkeeper, Caitlin Stumpf, who scored that goal for us, brought us the win, but not to underplay our sophomore Maria Ortega's shutout as a goalkeeper. So congratulations. And additionally, we had the Washingtonville Invitational Cross Country meet. And Elosh Froy, am I saying that right? I'm going to go with that, was our top finisher in 15th place. And it's one in which we were very proud that we continue to be a small school, but we have some top finishers. So kudos to the efforts that were given. We are going to be starting back up our region in review this week, so we want to make certain that we are getting out that message. But I didn't want to have the first message that comes out from our office being anything less than wonderful, so we wanted to make certain we had the time to fill it with pictures, things that are happening for the beginning of the year, so we could really celebrate all that was done. Additionally, just to share with you our AP enrollment, because I know that's something we all want to look for, and how are we getting our students to take on some of those challenging courses. Currently, we have 155 physical seats that are taken up. So we have 155 of the courses that are being taken. So that's not to be confused. We don't have 155 students taking them. So some of the students are taking multiple courses, but currently in our seats, we have 155, and we have 6 virtual seats. So I'm impressed that our students are taking advantage of the opportunities. The new courses that you've approved, students are absolutely hopping into those seats. So that is very promising. And I also want to encourage PTO involvement from our communities. I will be starting a PTO executive council in order to create some more connections between our PTOs, and so working with them if there's ideas that are happening at one school to spread them throughout our district so we can help along. And enrollment update, we have 685 students. Of those 685, a total of 82 students are tuition in. So that includes Sherman students, yes. 27 Sherman students, if you want to break it down. No problem. I can do the elementary. So at Burnham, we have 53 students. Of those 53, 14 are non-resident. At Booth Free, we have 73. 1 student is a non-resident. At Washington Primary, we have 142 students. 9 are non-resident. No problem. I ran out of words.
Finished, huh? Okay. Any questions? And all of our non-residents, that includes staff students as well, staff children? Just a few?
14 staff students.
Okay. Could you, because I see you looking at your paper, could you send that to the board electronically? Thank you. And all of our tuition in students. Again, everybody signed, paperwork is done, tuition received, right? Everything is,
Tuition was received on August 1st.
Great.
So everyone was in compliance with the board's policy.
thank you.
Fantastic.
Very good.
It's really, it's good. It's very good.
Yeah. It's nice. Okay, committee reports. At Advance, Michelle? Anything yet?
We had our first board meeting last week sometime, Thursday, I think. And actually, I'm going to hand out, they sent me with handouts for the board.
And
Yeah, well, it's just mostly a reminder. I know, it's pretty funny. They have an annual meeting. You can send a few that way. Annual meeting, oh, I just sent them all the way. October 4th, 2018 from 4 to 6. It's an opportunity for all the member districts to come to their Litchfield offices, to learn a little bit more about what they do, to see the presentation, a brief presentation of the annual budget, and to ask questions and meet the staff. So they'd really love to see some participation, just so that everyone can understand what they do for us. We had a really interesting meeting last week, going over our upcoming budget for the coming year. It's been a challenge with the state because a lot of the money, their operating money, comes from grants, so that's been a little bit of a challenge, but they still managed to complete all of their programs and their objectives. They have grown in a couple of areas pretty significantly. One is their transportation. They have Ed Advance buses running all over the place. They've decided to use their transportation expertise and start offering a driver's ed course. I think you probably all got in your mailbox the continuing ed, what do they call it, the Foothills or something, catalog. That's Ed Advance that runs all of those programs. A lot of exciting things happening with professional development and combining that. Right now they're working with a program called Ruler out of Yale, which is an emotional intelligence program. It's like the second step that we have. And what's wonderful is they bring in these programs that are, whether it's speakers, professional development, people from around the country, and allow multiple districts to participate. So it's a very cost-effective way of getting some pretty high-end professional development. So that is pretty cool. Another thing that they showed us was this great interactive map that they've created of bus routes of all of the students with special needs that are going out of district, so that transportation directors can share bus rides. It's fantastic, and it kind of made me wonder if we couldn't create something similarly for agri-science / tech. You know, we've got kids moving this way and kids moving this way, and you know, I mean, Bob's been doing this forever and saving us a lot of money of offering to pick somebody up along the way and then dropping somebody off as they, you know, sharing vans, a lot of ride sharing. But this is really a great use of technology to see this interactive map and how you can just look, and it shows you the destination, you know, where they're going, where on the route, so you can just kind of click and play around with it. So a really great resource that they've created. So just a lot of things that you know, they sort of refreshed our memory on a lot of the things that they do have already done. Oh, another area that they've really expanded is alternative ed programs. They've had their access program down in Danbury, and they the papers are almost signed on the building purchases of a former Catholic school in Torrington. I forget, Saint something, I forget what. But their program has grown because there's been a need. Last year, the Torrington program started with 3, and this year they're starting with 26 students. So, and it's a really wonderful resource for the districts, because before Ed Advance was providing this, if we needed this alternative education, we were having to send our students much farther and for much more money than tuition. So out-of-district placement is a really expensive line item, so anything that can be done to pool resources and meet those needs is really helpful. So I think that's mostly it. Oh, the only other thing, they put together a member district calendar. I figure you and Bob might like that because it shows all the other districts' closings around you, so that if you're sharing buses or you want to know who's in session, it's like all of the districts' calendars put onto one calendar, which might be useful. I don't know. So there you go. I think that's it for Ed Advance. I did want to say one other thing, though. It's not like an official committee, but this week, Wednesday, the Government Relations Committee of CABE that I'm on is meeting, and it's the resolutions meeting where we'll be looking at the resolutions that have been put forward by the different boards to be acted on or voted on as part of the platform for the agenda of CABE as they interact with the state, whether it's the Education Committee or the State Board of Ed or whomever they're working with, so that they have a sense of what the boards that they represent are looking for. And I had asked last year that we form a committee of small districts to talk specifically about the challenges of small districts. And we were sort of emailing about that. And so I was wondering if board and administrators could think about issues that come up that are challenges because we're small. There are things that the state passes. We see it with policy, like for example, graduation requirements that when you're as small as we are and cause scheduling problems, some kind of relief from things like that, or sharing of resources. There are lots of different ways that being small can be a challenge, and just kind of having a sense of what are the things that get in our way at the moment. So yeah, you look like you might have some ideas. So think about that, please.
Just quick, CAPS has started a committee on that as well, and I'm actually part of I signed up specifically because of that, but it'd be nice to see how they interplay too, so that would kind of be a nice marriage. So
great.
Thank you.
We'll talk about it. Thanks, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Education, Michael.
Exactly. There we go. So we've had two meetings, one over the summer and one this evening. Unfortunately, neither of them had quorums, so they're not official meetings. But hopefully, I'm living in hope for our next education committee meeting that we will have a quorum, and we can get some official news out to all of you. You will see, though, on your upcoming calendar that our next our first one for the calendar year, that's an education meeting, is coming up on the 24th. And the topic on that one, which I'm sure is going to be a popular topic this year in general, is Ag STEM. And we're going to be hearing about FFA. So more to come in that meeting. But also just a request for anybody, if there's a topic that you would love for us to address, send me a quick email, and be happy to try to schedule something during the school year. We have a couple new programs this year. I know on the AP front, we've got 2 new AP classes, correct, that we're running. So that might be a natural item of curiosity for you in terms of those 2 offerings. Maybe some other course offerings at the high school that I'm aware of, and probably some initiatives at the elementary levels that we can talk a little bit about too, upcoming meetings.
We have a meeting in 2 weeks' time, so I'll have a report after that.
Okay. Finance, who's covering for Stephanie? Thank you.
Stephanie apologized. She had to leave. I believe it's a Jewish holiday today. So for finance, we had our first meeting of the year this year. And the first thing that Stephanie reported was that she has been in to sign the checks, the vouchers is what it really is. And I went with her for, we were there for an hour and a half or two the other day. And she was really impressed with how wonderful the office staff are. Helen and Nancy just did a fantastic job of explaining all of her questions, and we learned a lot about health insurance. And she just wanted everyone to know that she feels very confident after looking at the checks and then all of the supporting work that goes with them, that every payment has been checked and double checked. And you can see that. I've always appreciated after you turn out, you look at the copy of the check, but then behind it is the invoice with highlights and initials and questions and comments, and then printouts of if somebody purchased something, you'll see exactly what was purchased from the vendor, or for building purposes, you'll see the invoice and you'll see questions from Don, was this completed? And then you'll see an answer from someone else. So there's a lot of supporting details. So everything that's being paid has been checked and double checked. And we got quite an education on health insurance and how challenging it is to deal with those bills because of all the different unions that we have and the different retirement policies or packages that we put out. So that was really helpful. Bob wants to.
If you came into the office, all of that information is scanned behind the actual financial statement as well. So you need it for audit purposes, you need it for the state, that's the paper side. But for posterity, everything is in the system. So we've got it in multiple places.
Just since you brought it up, what's the retention policy on the paper?
The paper itself is based upon a retention schedule set by the state librarian, and personnel records are different than invoice records. So what we do is we purge those every year. I could get you that whole schedule of all that stuff, but every July, if you came into the office at the end of July, all of the schools, we purge all the records that we can based on the sign off by the state librarian. So we follow their policy. So it kind of varies when they change it, but it's just been one of those cleanup items that we've had going on for a long period of time.
All right, so then during the meeting, we went over two sets of books, the final books of June 30th, which is not audited, so it's a preliminary. It's not completely closed out, but most of the activity is completed. And we ended the year with $3,218. But what Bob was able to do was put $875,000 roughly towards agri-science. So that was really wonderful. That's that much more that we don't need to borrow. So we finished that year very nicely. Then we looked at the August books, the beginning of the 2018-19 fiscal year, which we have just started. We currently have 6% remaining, or 6.3%, sorry, which is normal for this time of year. All of the budget, or all of the line items or areas, can't think of the word, are tracking to normal, so we are not seeing anything out of the ordinary at the moment. I think that's, there really wasn't much to comment on the opening of the year. No surprises financially, and so I guess that's a good thing. Then we just took a look at the Capital Reserve Fund and the elementary lease fund. So the Capital Reserve Fund currently has $5,902 in it as of June 2018, but that is not accounting for the projects that we pulled out of the operating budget last year and will be paying for out of this operating budget. I don't know the exact amount, but believes that was around $250,000 worth of work to be done in this fiscal year that we approved when we were working on last year's operating budget. So that would leave us with around $700,000. As we know, sometimes those estimates come in a little bit differently, but we'll watch those projects as the year goes forward. Then we also looked at the elementary capital non-recurring fund. We did $66,968 worth of work last year in the 2017-18 year. We opened that year with $166,228, so leaving us $99,000 as of June 2018. And we have just transferred, or Bob obviously has just transferred in the $100,000 for this year, which leaves us $195,000 for this year's elementary work to be done. We did approve some things to be done out of that fund when we were working on the operating budget last year, and those will come in probably our next report. So I don't know exactly how much of that we approved, but I'm pretty sure it was less than $100,000. Does that seem right, Bob? Okay. And that was the end of our committee report. Are there any questions? Oh, well, you had news.
Through that wonderful begging of the state for the space standards waiver, Megan got news today that it was approved for both projects, so we don't get slapped with the space standards waiver reduction in our reimbursement rates. So the 80 stays at the 80 for all the eligible expenses, and the science rooms down in the 30s, but that's what we were getting anyway. So we're in good. That was good news today.
Great news.
Certainly is.
The only other thing that we talked about in the committee, was that the ban has been received. Bob has access to all the money that he needs for the construction project to move forward, and he has it in a daily money market, so he's actually earning interest until we get work started. So, well done, Bob.
And I just want to thank both Bob and Debbie for their efforts on that space waiver letter. That was no small feat, so congratulations to both of you. So.
Bob, all of the analysis that we've done to date, we were assuming we were going to be successful in getting that waiver? Right.
We were assuming that we were going to get it for the eligible costs, so
Right.
it's not like additional money. I was optimistic we were going to get it, and we just had to go through the proper hoops to get it done.
Right. Okay. Just want to confirm. Thank you. All right. Long-range planning, Alan?
Yeah, I have talked to Megan about this, and I'm leaving it up to her and her schedule and bandwidth to tackle long-range planning. I am going to, when she lets me know she has time and space for it, we will have a meeting. I would suggest that since we have time on Monday, we could slip a half an hour in there. But I don't want to put her on the spot, so I'll let her contact me this week, and I'll let you know. And if not, we will schedule it in a longer range of time.
Next week's good.
Really? You sure? Well, then I'll send out an email to the members, and we'll see if we can meet for half an hour before digital. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes, she is. Negotiations, Greg?
Yes, we are currently in negotiations with the union representing our custodians and cafeteria workers. We've conducted a number of negotiating sessions, and we're looking for a date to mediate and we should have that shortly.
What was Greg, the other negotiations that were originally scheduled for this year, and maybe still will happen, was what the clerical staff?
Yeah, it's a non-certified union of paraprofessionals and clerical staff. That we are trying to schedule that for negotiations. Their contract expired June 30th of this year, and we've had some difficulty getting that scheduled.
So is the contract, are we honoring the terms of the expired contract, or does the contract provide for such a circumstance so that we still have some legal?
Well, what happens if you don't negotiate a new contract? You continue paying the last amount due under the contract, which would have been the third year of that contract.
So that's our legal obligation.
That's our obligation. That's what we do.
Got it. Michelle?
I believe there was some question of whether they were going to continue using the same, whether they're going to be represented by the same organization. There was some internal issue that had delayed moving forward on this. Bob, maybe you have some insight.
They decided to schedule a recertification and a new union to represent that group. They held a meeting. They held a voting session with the Department of Labor, and the upshot of that was that they did not succeed in reorganizing into another union. So it stayed within the union they're in currently, and the union itself has had a turnover at the union administration and working with the local. And so they haven't gotten their act together yet to even come up with the dates at all. Although we've asked them for it through council, nothing's happened.
Nope, we're in good shape on that. We verify that with council that there's nothing we have to do or can do at this point.
Right. Yeah. Okay, policies, Michelle.
We, as a committee, have not met yet. We'll be meeting in 2 weeks, and we only have one policy on the agenda, which is the second reading. So I'll
Right.
wait till then.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, new business and updates. Our standing item of the agri-science. So we'll start with the program status. Megan.
A lot of the work that we've been doing is also reconnecting with the districts that are going to be our sending districts. Anthony and I were able to meet with Newtown and talk to them about their transition over from Nanawag to the Chippewa School. I met with the Sherman superintendent today, and as a parent in Danbury, he was very interested in our agri-science program. So that was very promising, and I have to say right now it's being met with much anticipation and excitement. Lori Travato has been working with Danbury, Brookfield, and New Fairfield, so we really are making certain that we are touching base, setting up schedules, finding times in order to get into some of those 8th grade classes so we can share the upcoming excitement. I will be on October 4th, so apparently I'm competing with Ed Advance, but I will be presenting at the Gun Library for a community conversation, because it's not just about our sending schools, it's also making certain our community is part of our conversation as we continue to grow and evolve. 6:30. Well, there you go. I can get in the car. So as far as Teresa and Lori Travato have been working very hard with the curriculum development. At this point, they have created the outline of the pathway for plant science up to senior year, as well as mapping out the schedule of what it would look like for a student. We've also looked at the 9th grade experience to make certain they are able to explore all 4 of the pathways that we have. And more of that will be to come, as Mike had said, on September 24th when Lori Travato presents to us. But in the meantime, our 7th and 8th graders are getting a chance to experience agri-science lessons. We're getting to see they're experiencing and doing a lot of that hands-on, seeing what's around them, analyzing some soil, really getting into the experience into itself. And we're also working with, we need to think about how that Chippewa experience is going to look for our agri-science students. Something that Anthony keeps reminding me of is that 80% of their day they're in regular Chippewa classes and in the traditional model. It's 20% of their day that is really going to be the agri-science model. So even taking a look at the senior projects and SAEs and finding out how we can make certain that they come together and just thinking about some of those details to make certain that the experience is robust for all. But I do have to say on the upside, Michelle Gore came by and she was looking at some of the predictions and the specs that were laid out for staffing and student ratios. Pretty close to being psychic. The numbers were really coming to play when we were looking at our staffing projections. And so those were some really nice reassurances. But again, we are heavily recruiting. We want to make certain that we are getting our students who are interested in agri-science into our doors. And I'm going to let Greg talk about some of the achievements that happened with the logistics in our buildings, because we've had some really nice, exciting things to help us move forward. So,
I've got a question, or I should say a comment I'll share. So I had, talking to a Washington resident who has 2 children in the system, young children, but also themselves as parents were graduates of Region 14's program. So we got into a discussion which I thought was really, really helpful because he had no idea that I was on the board. So it was great to get real feedback about the program, the energy, the enthusiasm. But one question he asked me regarding the pathways, which is what I want to share specifically, was he asked about forestry management. And to be honest, that's something I know I've never thought about when we were talking in all the last couple of years, talking about the different pathways. And, it's an interesting subject for where we live, especially, with Steep Rock here, and they don't actually engage in forestry management. They feel like, forests should self-manage, and that's a school of thought. And there are other people who believe on the opposite side where you really should engage in forestry management. But as he reminded me, trees are just big crops that take a long time to grow, So I thought it might be interesting if you could talk to Lori about that, even if it's not a pathway per se, but to weave it into the curriculum somehow as a, it's a plant. But so I thought it was an interesting question. Alan?
I just want a little caveat is I think it's an entirely different discipline. I know that for instance, there's a very well-known School of Agriculture in Ames, Iowa, and there's a well-known School of Forestry at Yale. And not at Yale, but Yale has one. So, and I think it's a different thing. We might find that there is a way of having a little bit of, cross-pollination of the subjects, but otherwise, it may not be something that, unless we really want to be the first. That would be something to be the first agri-science school in Connecticut that actually has a forestry pathway. That would be groundbreaking.
Yeah, we as a group have talked about, how do we differentiate? How do we make ourselves unique? And, we're not necessarily going to be offering all the pathways that are available. We know that, but maybe we have an opportunity to create a new one. So I thought it was an intriguing question, and I wanted to share it with you. Julie?
Just a question, Megan. The presentation at Gunn, will there be more of those, or is that a standalone?
It's the start of the community conversation, so it is going to go into each of our communities. But to say that, I think the questions in each are going to be unique. So I don't think that there's going to be the same presentation twice. But I welcome anybody who is curious, wants to ask those questions, to join for that conversation. But yes, it will be ongoing. And also to speak to one of the things we talked about with Lori is to speak to. The internships are going to be an integral part of the student's experience. And so if students are interested in some of those I think Anthony mentioned some dairy products and what to do. Well, we have the farms that are local that we could have internships at for our students. So to say our experience isn't just going to be limited to what happens in these four walls or what happens on this campus. It's also the connections that we're going to be creating beyond. And I think that's going to be incredibly important, not just to create our program, but it's also inviting companies and places to help grow our three towns. So.
Thanks.
Share our conversation with Newtown. I think it was one of the first questions they asked her is our program going to have any affiliation with a university or college? You know, so I mean, it was pretty much like one of the first questions they asked us. We had a good answer, and I think the answer is that's if we can help it, yes, that's what we want. And the other part of the conversation, although I wasn't able to stay for the entire conversation, was we asked them the question, what's on your mind? What are you interested in? You know, you're sending your children to us, you know, to be educated as high school students, again, not just as an agri-science major, but high school students. What's on your mind? What would you like to see in this program? And I think the conversation also then brought its way to, well, you know, they're prepping their K to 7 or K to 8, excuse me. You know, they have a certain curriculum or pathway, and they're prepping their students to anticipate what is their 9th grade. Well, you know, how well does their 9th grade and our 9th grade sort of overlap from a curricula standpoint? And are these kids going to be able to come in here and smoothly merge with our children, having what our children are prepped for versus what their children are prepped for? So it was a great conversation. First one of many, but they thanked us for actually stopping and asking what they thought. She said, this is a first. No one's ever bothered to ask us what we thought. So, and like I said, it's the first of many conversations, but I think we're all in violent agreement that if we can build these relationships with our sending towns, it'll help. You know, it certainly can't hurt, but it certainly will help us build a program that we all had in mind when we first started. So, Michelle.
I was just going to say that I spoke with Michelle Koo, who's the board chair from Newtown. She was at the Ed Advance meeting, and she really appreciated Megan coming and talking in person. Like, she made a point to come and say that to me, and I think the more, just like you were saying, the more that happens, the better those relationships will be, and not only will we be able to hopefully move forward from a more from a stronger position, but also we'll be able to, if there are not just concerns, that will have opened up the communication before there's a problem, not waiting until there is one. So she really appreciated that.
Okay, Greg, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm pleased to report that we've made some very good progress in moving forward with the construction of the Ag STEM and Science Lab renovations. I can tell you that one of the things we were focused on was a meeting on the 28th of August with the DAS's Office of School Construction Grants. And this was a follow-up on, and we went to that meeting wanting to leave with the authority to go out to bid, because the sooner we go out to bid, the sooner we can award contracts, the sooner we award contracts, the sooner we can start construction. And so it was critical for us to get that, and there was an awful lot of work. The superintendent and I were riding herd on everyone to make sure that we achieved all of the items on the critical path to obtaining that. And we went to the meeting on the 28th, and the one thing we had wanted to get, we knew there were 2 items we had not completed. We did not have the local and state health sign-offs, and we did not have the Office of State Traffic Administration sign-off because people were on vacation, things were moving through the state bureaucracies and that kind of a thing. And we asked if they would let us go forward and go to bid without those, and the state did grant that. They gave us authority to go to bid. And we did, in fact, on the 29th, go out to bid. The bids have been put out, and so we are currently actively seeking bids. We think we're in a pretty good market for bidding. We think there's a lot of interest. I was told tonight by Laurel Purcell at O&G that while normally it takes a week or more to get inquiries, requests for information from potential bidders where they want to ask some questions, yet within days of this going on the street, she had received 6. So it appears that there's some interest out there. We're very happy about that. We're hoping to get some good bids in on this. In addition, as you heard, we've obtained the space waiver from the state. In addition, we have received the state and local health sign-offs that we didn't have when we went to DAS. We now have those. We expect the state traffic sign-off fairly soon. It's still in progress, and apparently they needed some things from the local towns. They needed an indication that the plans that were in front of them were the ones that the commission signed off on, and there was some question because they were looking at an old set of plans, and now they realize they have the right ones, so we're all set on that. It's just a matter of getting the sign-offs and those letters sent up to OSTA, and then we should be through that. We are now focused on the next critical path, which is to obtain the authority to award contracts. Because although we got the authority to go to bid without OSTA sign off and without the state and local health, we didn't get the authority to award the bids. We have some time, and we do have the state and local health, and we'll have OSTA shortly. So we should be in good shape to award those bids when the time comes. We expect to be out bidding. Originally, we had told them, I think, the end of September. I forgot it was the 27th or 29th, but the end of September we would close the bidding. We've received some requests to extend it a little further, and we will probably extend it a little further. But Laurel has again told us that while she originally expected to come back to us after she had done her work reviewing the bids, vetting the bids, making sure the bids included all the items that we had asked for, she expected to come back to us for decision on awarding the bids on October the 29th. She's now thinking that will move up to October the 14th. So we may grab 2 weeks back from the process on that. So that's the date by which we must have already had in the bank the state approval to award bids. And we are focused on that critical path and getting that done.
Greg, just a couple clarifications. So once we get those sign-offs, we've got a green light then to award. We don't have to go back with an award list and to the state to have them sign off before we actually execute. So we've got to.
They look at your bid. You present a bid package to them of what you're planning.
What they have to see is those 2 approvals to then say you're good.
Yeah, but so if we get those tomorrow, for example, hypothetically, and they see those, they give us the green light, and then
To
we're
award.
on our own
Right.
to make the awards.
That's correct. Then we're on our own to make the awards, and we would then fairly quickly, the building committee is, as soon as it's presented with those bids, and we'll also be getting a guaranteed maximum price on phase 2. You know, we received a guaranteed maximum price for phase 1, and phase 1 is completed. That's the
Well,
demolition and abatement. Well, there's a couple of little items that still remain, a couple of little minor things. Most of them are involving that fan down at the other end of the building. But we're pretty much completed with phase 1. We'll get a guaranteed maximum price on phase 2. Therefore, we'll know what our cost for the project will be at that point. And if it's in line, then we'll award those bids. And if the amount of the bidding, the requirements exceed the amount that you've authorized the building committee to spend, then we will be back to see you. But we anticipate that we're going to do pretty well on that. We're hoping to do well on that and move forward.
So the bid packages are, they're broken down like in major pieces of phases of the project, or are we going out looking
Major
for
trades. They're
like steel, site work,
right.
something like that?
Yeah. They're broken down into the principal areas of it. You know, the steel. They're broken down into the various trades and whatnot. And what happens when those bids come in? The O&G will look at those bids, and they're going to look to see if they're going to see low bidders. They're going to see a gradation of bidders, and if they see big gaps, they're going to look very carefully at those low bids, especially to make sure that they've included everything in their bid. And some of those tend to disappear if they've missed something and haven't included it in their bid. But then at that point in time, they're going to come back with a list of bids that they think are the responsible low bidders, and they're going to give us a number for the contract at that point.
So which of the trades, which one is the critical path to holding the schedule? Who should be, what trade needs to be awarded first in order to maintain the schedule?
Well, virtually all of them. I mean, you need to have site work. You need the site work contractor, because they're going to have to do the site work that's necessary to prepare for the footings and foundations. Then you're going to need those installed. You're going to need the structural steel up, the building skin, the roof, everything to close it in. And then, of course, once it's closed in, you're moving in on all of the interior work that has to be done. So all of those are critical. This is a very time-critical contract, and our bids indicate the time-critical nature of it. Bob, you had something.
Yeah, just as Greg said, they're all critical, but one of the most critical is that once they're awarded these contracts, there's a long, in some instances, lead time to get the material on site to actually do the
Well,
construction.
that was the nature of my question.
They all have to go about the same time.
Site work is the obvious, because you got to start moving dirt first before, but if the steel has a lead time,
They all
you know,
have,
then that one could be the most important one to go first, so you start working inside your lead time. That's the nature of my question. So which one of the trades is got to go first, steel or site work? And what I'm really getting at is, let's make sure we understand that, and it we're, to the extent, hopefully we don't have this problem, but make sure we're all focused on getting that one done first and the next one done second,
Well,
right?
that's yes.
Which is what we rely on O&G to be doing for us
Correct.
anyway.
We're relying on O&G to do that for us. They know what they need to do, because they know when they have to deliver the building.
Yeah.
Our expectation is that we will be in a position to award those bids sometime after the 14th of October, and that we will start construction. We're currently scheduled for November 7th, but that may get moved up if we're able to get work done, if we're able to get those bids awarded sooner rather than later. We may be able to start earlier than that. But that's our current expected start of construction. We are scheduled to deliver the science classrooms and Ag STEM renovations in July or August of 2019. The Ag STEM addition, greenhouse, and animal building will be a little bit later in the process, but we're not really sure what that date is, because tentatively they're carrying a date out to around October, but they're probably going to back that into September, and it'll be due. Those will be completed sometime in September. Some of them may be completed even earlier, so we're working on that. The dates are kind of hard to pin down right now until we actually have the bids awarded and we know when we're actually starting construction. And so those dates have slipped a little. We didn't want them to slip, but they've slipped a little because of the time that it's taken to move through some of the approvals. But we believe that we're going to be able to move those dates back into better dates. And I believe that we are going to be asking that the school year for 2019-2020 start after Labor Day rather than in August. That would give us another week of time to have full access and be able to run full bore on construction and possibly finish things earlier than we anticipated. So we're working on that as we speak. I think the other thing I wanted to mention to you is that this Thursday we're going to have, starting at 3 o'clock in the auditorium, we're going to have contractors, people who are interested in bidding, coming to the site to give them an opportunity to look at it and to look at areas of it. Some of them will come, some of them won't, but that's also to facilitate the bidding process. And I think that I don't have a lot more to tell you, but that's where we are going. We do have we did get our first report. It really is a draft report through July 31st, 2018 from O&G, and I'm going to be sharing probably the next report with you, because the next one will carry more of the costs in it for stuff we've already expended, soft costs. They don't generally pay attention to those. We've asked them to do that. So you will get a report. It will take you through the costs, the status, where we are, whether we've done any change orders or not. We haven't at this point. And we'll take you through just all of the issues in the project. Once you see this, you'll get this every month, and you'll be able to have the ability to drill down in the report to find things that you might want to know about the project. But you'll have a good idea of where we are cost-wise and work-wise. And so this report will start to come out to you probably in the beginning of October. And then you'll be getting it every month at the beginning of the month thereafter. So hopefully in time for our business meeting. Will we have this report will be out, and you'll be able to see what's happening with it. And then on the financial front, we're still on target. I mean, we haven't exceeded anything that would put us over budget at this point, but we'll know a lot more when we receive the bids. That'll be our day of reckoning here. I think in terms of phase one leftovers, we had a little bit of a rough issue with the fan unit down at the far south end, north end of the building. We had some warm temperatures in those robotics and graphics classrooms. We had temperatures outside in the mid-90s, and that meant that because we're still waiting for the damper on that unit, it meant the temperature coming in through the unit was 104 degrees being blown into the classrooms, and we had to shut that off and do an alternate route to ventilation. But we did manage that, and we're trying to button that up. We just gave authority to go out and make an expenditure tonight for the items that we need in order to try to fix that thing and get it in a little bit better operating shape. So that's pretty much my report.
Right, John.
Yeah, just one quick question, and I know it's a little bit early to tell, but worst case scenario, some of the components are not completed by September of the next school year. Are there any prohibitions or restrictions put on by DAS or the State Department of Education concerning opening the school?
No, that's not their concern. They're worried about what the total cost is. They're less worried about when you actually deliver it. I think if that were a concern, we would have seen different pressures applied earlier in the process. It's not a concern that I'm aware of.
John, you're not getting at like a certificate of occupancy issue, are you?
More so like, obviously, probably a lot can be done in the classroom inside the existing footprint, but some of the things like the greenhouse and the outdoor arena, I'm just worried that perhaps someone at the State Department of Education or something will say, you don't have a full program, so how can you open?
Yeah, well,
Remember, this is the 4-year experience, so I think that, no, they may not be exposed to everything in the first couple months, but it will certainly be over the course of their experience in the agri-science program. There are definitely plenty of things we can do around the campus, and we would have to tailor our lessons to if things are not complete. But to know that they're going to be going through the 4 pathways, it's an experiential learning, and as they go through our program, it's really 11th and 12th grade in which they go deeper. They're going to need that greenhouse at that time. So we have some time. However, we want to be able to showcase everything as soon as possible.
yeah, I think that what we've tried to do and what I've asked O&G to do is to coordinate very carefully with Kim Gallo and with our curriculum people to make sure, you heard tonight, I wanted to make sure that if there's a priority of something that needs to get done sooner in order to support the program, and they can give it that priority, that they do that so that we get things opened as quickly as possible. But one of the things we've been working on is trying to bring those dates back to the beginning of September if we could, so that we're really maybe only a week or 2 into the year when the final things come online to the extent that we can use them and obtain a CO. So that's sort of what we're pushing for. Mike?
And that's what I was going to ask, Greg. Are we still looking at opening right after Labor Day weekend next year?
Yes. I think we're still looking at that, and there may be a couple of things that come online just a week or 2 later, but it should be that most of what we need, the core facilities we need to commence the school year, will be available, and those are the facilities within the north end of the building, where that's where all the agri-science classrooms are, and then of course the science labs at the far end of the building, where the agri-science science labs are. Those will all be available in the summer before the start of school. And then the question is, when does the greenhouse come online? When does the animal building, demonstration building come online? And when do the shops come online?
And just to follow up on that, how soon will the staff actually be able to access the building before the student? I understand the students would be starting after Labor Day weekend, but staff being able to set up their classrooms, actually get into the space in a safe manner.
Well, we're anticipating that the buildings will be CO'd by mid-August, so it's not going to be months in advance this year, but it'd be a couple of weeks, we hope.
Yeah, I just want to underscore a point that Megan and Greg have been working closely together since she's been on board in making sure that the building committee and the program can't be on parallel tracks, right? There's a point of convergence out there that has to happen. So the building committee is not making decisions in a vacuum, and Megan's not operating, from a program standpoint in a vacuum without having a building, et cetera, et cetera. So, so that those conversations are happening. And if we, whatever decision the district makes about what day we open the program and everything else, it'll be made ultimately in the same vein. It has to be, and it has been, and will continue to be. So I think it's important everybody understand that.
Yeah, I asked tonight, I asked ONG if they could give us an indication of what would be the kind of thing that they needed that would help them move things up a little bit even earlier, to really drag us into getting everything done really early. And they said weather could be a determining factor. And so I assured them that our superintendent will be able to obtain the weather we need. So I've seen her in operation. She will get us the weather we need. So no, seriously, it's there are variables like that. We don't know what kind of winter we're going to have. We don't know whether or not there are going to be delays in breaking ground when we want to break ground because of weather. You're looking at a major hurricane approaching the east coast of the United States, and they're not quite sure where it's going to end up. You don't know what's going to happen in those things to delay it, so you're just going to have to go with whatever it is. But they've got plans to move this up as much as they can, and we're pressing them on that.
All right, thank you, Greg. Unless there are no further questions, Bob, Greg sort of touched on it. Was there anything you want to cover? Okay. And just so, from a process standpoint, the cost in terms of the budget performance, I know is coming through ONG, but in terms of the financing, is that going to be covered through the finance committee? Did you guys talk about that? Or should we talk about? In terms of how much money's been paid to date, against the outstanding invoices, to me that's more of a financial discussion of accounts payable, not budget performance. And I wanted to.
Sure.
I thought whatever we do, we should make sure those waters don't get muddied, right?
No, and Bob has tracked every one of those numbers.
Oh, I know he has.
And,
I'm just saying.
We're working in cooperation with ONG right now to transfer those over to the bigger report.
Okay.
To make sure all the financial costs are in place, so they will have it. It's just a matter of straightening out the percentages, because some of these bills span 2 different projects, so we have to coordinate between them as to get the maximum reimbursement from the state. And now in terms of the financing itself, the ban that we just issued will come due in March. Backing ourselves up from that, we're scheduled on my calendar to start working on the permanent bond rating, because we got a band rating of AA2. We anticipate having the same thing when we present the final information to Moody's and the other respected houses down in New York. And that'll give us a number once we have Greg's or the ONG input of what truly are bondable at that point versus the band issue. So we'll have that overlap and how we're going to do it.
And
we'll discuss that through finance.
And what is the timing of going for that second credit? rating?
Well, we're starting work on that. The pulling the information together, I believe we're going to start that mid-November, and we're hoping to finish it, have everything in place by the third week or fourth week or the end of January, so we can get that rating.
Okay, Michelle?
When do you get to apply for your first state reimbursement, since we've spent so much already that is reimbursable?
Oh, I've got that in process now of totaling it up, but it will probably go in, this is the beginning of October, because there's, after the first one, you have a lag. So what I'm trying to do is capture as much as I can on that first application to replenish what we spent out.
Right.
And
What's the schedule for applications for reimbursement?
every 2 months.
Every 2 months. So, and they're set months. It's
Yep.
not like
Once you do your
start
first one,
Oh, okay.
they roll it, but you can't apply earlier than
Right.
the time frame from the first one. So we could have applied, but it would have been a small amount of money. We're able to handle that right now. So rather than disrupt it, I wanted to get the maximum that we could get out first. And that's why I've collected all these things and getting them ready to put that first application in.
That makes sense.
I have to really wait until they tell us we could actually award those bids, and that's what I'm waiting on.
I think, to Anthony's point, it would make sense for, in the building committee, the ONG chart and how we're doing against budget and all of, they make all the okays on the work and everything like that. But it would be interesting to maybe add something to the finance committee, just a bottom line
Yeah,
of paid out and what's come back in from the state, so we can just sort of see the bottom line of and how close we're getting to the limit of that 9 million.
The net amount.
Yeah.
We're obligated.
Yeah.
sure.
Well, and also the timing of it, because that's really, I think, the tricky part, because the ban is for 9 million, but the project is obviously much larger than that, because the state is going to be paying a huge chunk of it. So to see that state reimbursement
No,
coming.
and the state's holding
how
back
that
money
works.
on us too. Every time you go in for an application, the state has a holdback until the project is actually
Right.
audited and completed. So we've got to just measure that.
Yeah, so there's definitely a finessing of the timing
Oh, yeah.
on all of that. So I think just seeing that bottom line play out would be
As soon as we do that first application, we'll be in a position to give you that information in a more concise manner. The actual guaranteed maximum price is the real kicker in this, and that we'll get when we get the bids in, because that's going to tell us where the bottom line is. And the only way we're going to mess that up is if if choices are made to change something from the guaranteed maximum price. If somebody wants to put up something that wasn't in there initially, but we could do it because we have the money, that may change the guaranteed maximum price.
All right, moving to the next item on the agenda, which is a Board of Education meeting frequency. I'll just say this, that Megan and I were talking about the schedule of meetings, and I think this is something we could talk about further during our retreat in October. But I am going to start to look at, as the agendas build, see whether or not it makes sense to cancel a particular meeting and move the agenda items down to just lessen the load on the administration as well as on the board. But I'm not suggesting we change the meeting calendar as it is, so don't go making any plans. It'll be more right now spot, but longer term, perhaps moving to a different frequency. But I think up front right now, especially with Megan being new and the building being in a very I'll say volatile position right now of getting these bids and everything, we need to continue to meet probably at the same frequency. So I'm thinking about, later on in the year, maybe changing that frequency up. So give that some thought. Think about it. I said we could talk a little bit more at the board retreat to see if we want to formally start to change the schedule. The downside of if we meet less is when we do meet, those meetings might tend to be a little longer, but that may also help us maybe be a little bit more efficient as we conduct ourselves through these meetings. So it might be an interesting play there. But all right, did you have anything you wanted to add to that or no? No, good. Okay. All right. So the next action on our agenda is the approval of a video club trip to New York. Why don't you tell us why and what's going on?
Oh my goodness, Miss Brianne Pitt and her audiovisual students continue to just wow judges. Nationally, some of the students were the same who went down to Washington to showcase their video there. These students have been chosen from, I believe she said, I want to say 20,000 plus entries. And to go to the All-American High School Film Festival in New York City. It'll be from October 5th through the 7th in order to receive the National Film Award for their film Alone. So before you vote, I figure I'm going to, make certain you see the video and see how worthwhile it is. So Colin is currently setting up the video Alone that was done by our students here in Chippewa.
The global plague released by the melting of permafrost is currently responsible for the deaths of over 4 million people. This previously dormant epidemic killed 60% of the European population 500 years ago and has now spread more rapidly due to global travel advancements. We advise families to stay indoors and avoid travel.
Day 159. There's no one left. 159 days alone in this house. I've quarantined myself inside. Probably the only reason that I'm still alive. The plague killed everyone. It took everything from me. Everything. After being alone for such a long time, I think about the little things that are gone. Like butter. The taste. I took it for granted. Something so simple. Now gone. But it's not the only thing missing. The silence is deafening. It used to be so different, my life, and faster than I could have ever imagined. It changed. Could there be someone else out there? Is it worth the risk? Well, I guess, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. Maybe I'm not alone.
Wow.
Speechless, we are. Wow.
Do you know what the category? What was? Do you know anything about it? Like the entry? Do they just?
I'm uncertain. I know that we were pretty proud of the judging panel that we impressed because it consisted of John Legend and Kristen Stewart and a couple A-list Hollywood. But I'm not certain. But to say that during their field trip, they are able to actually go work with other filmmakers. There's different contests they get to be part of and really hone their craft. So to say that if this is where they're starting from, can you imagine where they're going to go?
That's wonderful. I know. What was that category?
Post.
Do you need a motion?
So I do need a motion.
I move we approve that the video club gets to travel to New York City on October 5th to 7th for the National Film Award.
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstained. The motion passes unanimously.
Bring Purell with them just in case.
That's great. That is really great. All right, policies. Michelle,
All right, we have
back to a second reading.
for second reading, policy 6172.4, parent and family engagement policy for Title I students. I'll just remind everyone, this is required by law, and there was a little bit of a delay in us getting this out because we have so few Title I students. Our administration wanted to make sure before we put the policy in place that we had a sensitive way to reach out to the parents of Title I students, but to not make those students or families feel singled out. So they put together sort of an outreach program that to reach all of the students, but making sure that the Title I families are engaged. I was hoping to have the brochure that they put together with me. I forgot that I did not have a policy committee meeting before this meeting, so I will definitely share that as we move forward. But barring any other questions, I would like to move forward with this because we did table it for a little while the administration worked on exactly how they were going to engage our families.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we accept for a second reading policy number 6172.4, parent and family engagement policy for Title I students.
Thank you. Second? Michael, thank you. Any further questions? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All those abstain? Motion passes unanimously from the second reading of policy 6172.4, parent and family engagement policy for Title I students. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. We're now in executive session at 9:29, or excuse me, 8:29.